Spooky season is upon us, and that means it's time to read all the scary stories that you can. These are 4 recommendations I give to you for Halloween time. The first book I'm going to recommend is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. Now, believe it or not, the book of Frankenstein is very different from the original movie Frankenstein quite a bit. It actually shattered my opinions and expectations of the book completely after reading it. Growing up, I thought the monster was called Frankenstein. He was green, he couldn't speak a word, and he was just mumbling and he wanted to kill people. But to be honest, that is not what happens in this book whatsoever. This book was created after a challenge was issued to Mary Shelley and her friends around a table about who can write the scariest story. And after the authors wrote their stories, everyone agreed that Frankenstein was in fact the scariest thing that they read. Now, for people who don't know the premise, the plot of Frankenstein, let me shed some light. So the main character, Victor Frankenstein, attempts to create a perfect being by assembling a collection of different body parts and reanimates it through electricity. Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, is shocked by his creation and he's unsure what to do with it. The monster escapes, starts understanding the world, and realizes that he is in a world that maybe he should not exist in. And that's all I'm going to say. This book goes beyond the classic horror and gothic themes. It actually really goes into more of the dangers of pursuit of knowledge. It goes into, what it means to be alive and human. And it genuinely asks a question of nature versus nurture. This book is actually quite deep for a 19th century novella because it's very small. And despite being written in the 1800s, it reads super easily, in my opinion, for such an old book. It's a timeless classic. And if you haven't read Frankenstein, it's an absolute must-read for anyone serious in the horror, gothic genre, and of course, Halloween reading. Now, my second book recommendation is of course going to be the other most popular monster, Dracula. It is a cultural icon of a book, and of course, Dracula is a cultural icon for Halloween. Written by Bram Stoker at the end of the 1800s, this book wasn't as well received as it is now. It has a lot of some themes that were kind of considered taboo at the time. It only became more popular later on in the 20th century when people were like, oh shit, like this is actually really good. We can make a movie out of it and stuff. For people who don't know what Dracula is about, let me enlighten you. So it's about a story that involves Count Dracula, an ancient creature and monster that attempts to bring a contagion from East Europe to London. And there's only a handful of people that stand in his way to his ultimate goal of, in some way, world domination. And as the story unfolds, we get a better understanding of all these characters and how they perceive Dracula as a threat while reading through the different letters that are written from character to character. And it is truly a battle of superstition versus rationality, science versus the unexplained. The atmosphere that Bram Stoker brings to the table when he's writing this book is fantastic. When one of the main characters, Jonathan Harker, slowly walks or slowly goes towards the castle that Dracula resides in, you just know that shit's gonna go down. You just know that this was a bad idea and Dracula is gonna go sicko mode on people, all right? It has this old school type of ambiance that I'm not sure I get from many other books. And, it brings upon themes of, superstition versus rationality. disease, contagion, the fear of the unknown, the fear of a country being consumed by some illness that we don't know about. And also, it has themes of sexuality and gender roles, how men and women are supposed to act in their day and age, and this book in some ways challenges it. It's very deep and complex, and it goes beyond just a vampire killing people. So before Dracula came Carmilla by an Irish writer named Sheridan Le Fanu. He has a longer name, but we don't go into that. What is Carmilla about? The main premise is that a widower and his daughter invite a young girl named Carmilla into their old Styrian castle in Europe. And the rich girl, Laura, is very enamored by this young woman, Carmilla, that is invited into the castle. And she starts developing some feelings towards this young stranger. And throughout the book, she starts being afflicted by some kind of illness. And then eventually you find out that, yeah, Carmilla may not be who she is. It really goes into some more of these taboo themes of sexuality, lesbianism, and forbidden love, while still capturing that gothic ambiance, and as well putting the reader in a situation of helplessness. Being only about 30,000 words in length, this plot is obviously going to be a lot less complex than Dracula, but it still presents ideas of vampirism, forbidden love, and the corruption of purity. I really suggest that Carmilla goes as a companion piece to Dracula in terms of comparing them and how both different types of vampires are written and perceived by the public. Now, the last book that I'm going to recommend is not from a European writer, but is in fact from American literature, and that is The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. This is a must-read for anyone interested in classic American literature. This story follows the main character, Ichabod Crane, who is in some ways a bookworm and is trying to enamor this woman in old New England in the United States. And throughout his pursuits of this woman in the Sleepy Hollow, you start understanding that American folklore, ghosts, and superstitions run wild in this little nook, this little area, pocket of Eastern United States. This story gave birth to the Headless Horseman, who has a head of a jack-o'-lantern. Again, this story has such a dreamlike and even cozy feel to this old town in New England that hasn't been swept up by the Industrial Revolution per se, and is still undergoing the change of superstition versus science and rationality. Heck, at the time that this book was written, people still believed that vampires existed and were the cause of tuberculosis or consumption, when it was called that back in the day. I'm not kidding. There's legitimate stuff about that. I think of it gives me like Thanksgiving vibes with like the pilgrims and stuff. Like that's it. It's like everyone's a pilgrim and there's like ghosts in a forest and you're just creeped out by branches snapping, eyes that are staring at you from a tree trunk. You know, it's got that old American Salem witch era energy that is just fantastic. You need to read this for the ambiance. You need to read it for your cultural enrichment in terms of the Headless Horseman and jack-o'-lanterns. It just gives you a much better appreciation of that time in American history. And it's not that long. It's a short story, really. And you can easily read this in a couple sittings. And honestly, after reading this story, it really makes me want to go and visit New England in the United States and go see these types of areas that exist. It's that powerful of a story. So there you have it. Those are my 4 book recommendations for Halloween. I've read these over the last couple of years, and I wanted to shed light on these for people who haven't read them, despite most of these books having such popularity in Hollywood and mainstream media, that sometimes people don't realize that the books are different from the movies or adaptations that exist already. Go back to the original source, read these books. You'll get a much better, profound understanding of what, you know, these stories are and what they should be, and, you know, enjoy the literature that has been created before we were born. It is so fun to read old books that have really put a stamp in literature and just culture in general. You read these books, you're going to be a more enriched human being, and I truly mean that. You just will. You connect with these old people that were pioneers of their time. You get to read their ideas. These people are long gone. These people are dead, but their stories always remain. And that, there's something special about it. You sit down on your couch, you put on the Fireplace Network or whatever, and you read these books, and it transports you back to when these were written. And it is the easiest and probably the only way that time travel exists, is to read these books that were written so long ago. I can't stress it enough how fantastic all of these books are. I think that these 4 classics are absolute staples in anyone's library, regardless or not if they wanted to read it for Halloween, spooky season, or whenever they want. It just makes sense to read them at this time of the year because these types of stories are glorified at this time of the year, and in my opinion, bring out an extra little something at this time of the year where you can really start to maybe wonder if this actually happened or not. Let me know if you're going to read any of these books, or if you have read these books already, and if you have any suggestions, please leave a comment down below. I would love to see what kind of books you would recommend me to read for Halloween. And if you liked the video, give me a like. And if you really, really liked the video, subscribe. Thank you very much.